Okay, we are going to start this morning this message with a thought exercise. This is a participation exercise. Think of a time when you were in a physical place or space that was so right, so true, so meaningful, significant, beautiful, so mattering that it felt free and eternal and alive. A place that you've never been able to shake or forget, nor would you ever want to. On a hike, in a building somewhere, with a group of people in a certain place, wherever. So, 20 seconds. Bring that place to mind, your place. Okay, where were you? Bill, where were you? Yeah.
Probably a place that we rented a number of years ago in Acreage. Stayed in a house
A house in Acreage looking out over a field, and it was perfect. It was right because there was nobody around. Huh. Solitude. Mark, where were you? Huh. Awesome. You'll appreciate Barb's place when I read it in just a second. I think she must have been near you there. I can't ask all of you, but over the years, since I first engaged the topic of architecture 6-7 years ago, I've asked people that question periodically to describe their place. Rob wrote when asked, he described, "The chair by my cabin window looks west toward the foothills. The low-hanging clouds burst over the hill, darting this way and that, while up above, so far above, a sundog is playing for what seems like an eternity. And for that same eternity, sitting in my window seat, I too am at peace in a turbulent world." Carol wrote, "I'm about 10 years old, lying in a snow cave that has been carved in my backyard, a remarkable 2-room shelter with a tunnel so tight I can barely make my way through. It is earthy and cold, safe and magical, a portal into a world of wild childhood imaginings, a perfect handmade palace. I could hide out here forever." Barb wrote, "Visiting Capilano Suspension Bridge when I was 15, I wandered off the trail and lay down on the soft green moss, smelling the green cedar scent in the warmth, staring up through the green cedars at the green-colored rays of sunshine coming through the treetops. I could feel, smell, and see green. God was completely there, and I felt His presence. It was incredibly peaceful and serene. Today, if I feel stressed, I remember that moment and try to feel, smell, and see it all again." Karen posted on my blog this week asking this question again. Her place was Salisbury Cathedral in southern England. Soaring above me, safe, solid, she breaks into poetry almost, trying to describe it. Light-filled souls of saints and sinners, heavy with God presence. I love reading those descriptions because I've been there in those or places like those places. In that chair with a view. I've literally been there, in your chair with that view, Rob. It is brilliant. And the solitude, Bill, you'd love that chair that Rob has at his place. I've been in that snow fort, mittens covered with snow, you can see your breath, everything just close around you, and looking up through that bluish snow. That cathedral, that forest. When I answer that question, I still come back to a place that Fran and I went to on vacation years ago called Bruges Brugge if you're German, Bruges if you're French, and they fight over the pronunciation of the name of the town. But it's a small little town in Belgium filled with old world beauty. And what in particular makes it distinct is that it has buildings from every century for 6, 7, 8 centuries in a row. And so you can see so much history right there in front of you in one square. And it kind of rooted me in time and let me know that I'm part of eternity. When I showed that picture, that one of Brugge to Fran this week, she immediately remembered what the weather was like, what we were feeling, what we had just done, where we were, what we were experiencing together. Like it just came back like that because of that space. Something about those places that is indelible and on the edge of what I describe as eternal. And there's something about that sense of eternality, something moreness, that I believe reminds me of a place long, long ago, reminds us of a place, a better place, long ago. Architect Christopher Alexander talks about a, quote, timeless way of building, a way of designing and building things that is alive, real, true, and create spaces that are alive, real, and true. So in your program, a quote from his book. He says, "There is one timeless way of building." He's talking over the course of history. It is thousands of years old, and at the same time, and at the same today, there is a timeless way of building. It is thousands of years old, and the same today as it has always been. The great traditional buildings of the past, the villages and tents and temples in which man or women feel at home, have always been made by people who were very close to the center of this way. It is not possible to make great buildings or great towns, beautiful places, places where you feel yourself, places where you feel alive, except by following this way. And as you will see, this way will lead anyone who looks for it to buildings which are themselves as ancient in their form as the trees and the hills and as our faces are. In describing this timeless way, he writes in another part of his book, although the process is precise and can be described in exact scientific terms, finally it becomes valuable, not so much because it shows us what we don't know, but instead because it shows us what we know already, only daren't admit because it seems so childish and so primitive. Those places that are perfect or near perfect show us what we already know. I could feel and smell and see green. God was completely there and I felt His presence. It was incredibly peaceful and serene. And when you were in that garden, I'm increasingly of the belief that you were having a mystical memory of a garden where God made man and woman and humanity to know their place and feel at home without any clothes on, so at home and alive. And the green must have been brilliant there. And through that green, I think you saw that green there. A time before things went offside and color got skewed and space tainted, and place went awry. The fit, the beauty, the sense of being surrounded, the peace, the coherence, the color, the security, the freedom, remind us of all of those things as we would experience them were we in the garden again with God. One thing I ask of the Lord, the psalmist wrote, this is what I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and to seek Him in His temple. Those places remind us, and they beckon us, Because every once in a while, I'm sure, Mark, you want to go back there. I want to go back there. I want to be in that chair again, in that room with those people there. Great spaces remind us, and they call us. And oh, to be in a perfect place all the time. But sadly, that doesn't exist. Space and place are not the way they're meant to be. And even the agnostic architect, Christopher Alexander, recognizes that sin has broken reality. He writes, "But in our time, the languages have broken down." He's referring to pattern languages, the way things are meant to work and fit together, the way of things. "Since they are no longer shared, the processes which keep them deep have broken down, and it is therefore virtually impossible for anybody in our time to make a building live." His language breakdown reminded me of, come on, you're already there on this Bible story. From Genesis 11. It's called the Tower of Babel. "Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As men moved eastward, they found a place in Shinar and settled there. And they said to each other, 'Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly.' And they used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. And then they said, 'Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we might make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the face of the whole earth.' But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower that the men were building. And the Lord said, 'If as one people speaking the same language,'" pattern language, "'they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so they will not understand each other.' And so the Lord scattered them from there all over the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth." Yeah, rereading that this week, it really sounds like God wanted to mess them up big time. But that story is within the context of a bigger story, which 8 chapters earlier in the book of Genesis tells the story of Adam and Eve turning their backs on God and succumbing to the temptation and saying, we want to design our own lives, and we want to build our own buildings and build our own beings, and we want to be God ourselves, God. And so Genesis 11, the story of Babel, is just a further ongoing playing out of that sinful move. It seems that to be a human being is to want to make and design and create things ourselves apart from God, so that we can somehow affirm the fallacy that we can somehow replace God in our lives. Why do we always want to save ourselves? All right, for the past 3 years, Fran and I have been, put that next slide up, will you, Philip, please? Thinking about creating a space at our house to sit outside. We love our house, little house in Glenbrook, very happy. Backyard absolutely sucks. Fence is horrible, big flat roof garage is ugly. There's no room, there's no lights. Neighbors have a patio that sits down and looks over us, their little Tower of Babel looking down on us peons. It's bad in our backyard, and so we just have always thought, well, until we move to another house, we will not have a real outdoor sitting area. But then Fran started to sit over several years, right beside the blue spruce, tucked in near the hedges in the back there, on the grass. The grass was sloping, her chair would sink if the soil was soft, but it was just this beautiful nook, perfect for an introvert. Just this quiet, reading, shady, right proportioned place. And so she said, why don't we build a stone paver thing, and we'll just create a tiny little 10-foot by 10-foot patio in that nook. So this picture I took on Thursday, just after the landscaper came, and got a quote and all that stuff, and now they're ripping out all the stuff. It's further along than that right now, and we're going to get this very cool little front patio in front of our house sometime over the next week. As I was writing about it in my sermon, Fran sends me a text. He's here, the landscaper's here. A foretaste of Christ's second coming. I'm not really serious on that last comment. But we're enhancing, as human beings, culturally mandated by God, again in the book of Genesis, to make the world and to fill it. We are enhancing a physical, natural space, and in our minds, maximizing its utility and its beauty and availability so that we can live a more flourishing, full, and alive life for the 2 months we have summer in Calgary. We're being co-creators with God in a way when we spec that kind of rustic stone and that kind of an edging detail and this way of laying them out and these colors put together in this way at these grades. We're co-ruling over the physical world with Christ when we do a little renovation, landscape renovation at our house. And to be honest, we don't do a lot of this kind of renovating stuff. I've been like a little kid all week looking out my window thinking, I used to be a project manager in development. I could go and help them organize this, and Fran is pulling me back in all the time. I keep bringing them pops because I want to talk about the spec of the substrate and yada, yada, yada. But I am excited, and we are thankful to God for the gift of a new patio. Thanks for this good new space, and we can hardly wait to sit there with our new umbrella and feel that little bit of heaven on earth that you've given us. And we believe that. I believe that. A gift from God to have a bit of money to do this little renovation. A gift from God to bring good design to a space. Where else does good design come from? A while back, someone sent me this email thinking about architecture, and I was blogging about it at the time. And this person wrote, when I woke up this morning, I was reminded of a quote in Bruce Maugh's book and exhibit, Massive Change. And the quote was this: for most of us, design is invisible until it fails. And I remember the first time I read this and was struck by the profundity of it, that most of us walk through our lives not paying attention, not tuned into what works, why it works, how we feel and engage and are impacted by our surroundings or our stuff. It made me think, too, of how we also have this tendency to walk through our lives oblivious to the hand of God or in denial of all that He is until He, quote, fails us, or life caves in, or tragedy strikes. And then I think we either rail against Him or fall at His feet, knowing that we are desperately in need of Him. It made me go, And again I'm reminded to live with my eyes wide open. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And you are made in the image of a creator to create and design space, be it your kitchen table when you're preparing for a family gathering, or a meeting space for a group of people, or a whatever space, is to image and be like your God. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it, the psalmist writes. And then in Revelation chapter 21, and the one sitting on the throne said, Jesus said, "Look, I am making everything new." And I don't think we can get away with just reading one verse from Revelation. The first 7 verses of that chapter. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. heaven with a physical, material planet Earth. For the old heaven and the old earth had disappeared, and the sea was also gone. And I saw the holy city. Sorry, Bill. But the most amazing mix of green space and city, I'm sure, ever, and places of solitude and freedom. But a real city with streets and a river and walls made out of materials, designed, measured in proportion, the colors perfect. The New Jerusalem coming down from God out of heaven like a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud shout from the throne saying, "Look, God's home is now among his people. He will live with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death or sorrow or divorce or pain or rejection or boredom or suffering or crying. All these things are gone forever." And the one sitting on the throne said, "Look, I am making everything new." Outdoor, landscaped places, human hearts, entire societies, humanity, all of creation, every atom, from atom to archangel. And then he said to me, "Write this down, for what I tell you is trustworthy and true." And he also said, "It is finished. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To all who are thirsty, I will give freely from the springs of the water of life. All who are victorious will inherit all these blessings, and I will be their God. I will be your God, and you will be my children, and they will be my children." God is a God whose plan is to redeem all place and space. And one day, everything will be new again. Can you remember that place? Can you feel that hope, that future hope calling you? Great design and good architecture are a pointer to that, a foretaste of heaven. And Christopher Alexander describes it so beautifully. I've used this quote, I think, 12 times in the last 5 years. He writes, "Almost everybody feels at peace with nature, listening to the ocean waves against the shore, by a still lake, in a field of grass, on a wind-blown heath. One day, when we have learned the timeless way again, we shall feel the same about our towns, and we shall feel as much at peace with them as we do today walking by the ocean, or stretched out in the long grass of a meadow." So it's a both and. And you, if you know God, know Christ, can know that and get a taste, although not perfectly. We experience and know him and experience him in places through a glass dimly, through a foggy reflection. But it's there, deep in the DNA of your spiritual memory, and it's there calling you. Calling you, incidentally, through a carpenter, a builder. You figure a carpenter back in Jesus' time may have been just a woodworker, but was probably more of a stoneworker, woodworker, building maker, more of a general contractor, might have been what Jesus did. And theologian Neil Plantinga says that by giving Jesus the trade of being a carpenter, God was saying to that Babel story of architecture and design and building, "I'm making you new, even you new." The trades, we're told, we're going to make you new by Jesus taking on a trade. And I'd want to add to that idea that Christ is also redeeming design and creativity and good spec selection and all places, including this place in you and me, but including the places that the renewed you and me and we are going to live in. Deep inside of you, the Spirit transformatively knocking down that wall, because your inner space looks better without that wall, and opening that closet and cleaning it out, because you really do need freedom from that now in order to have a fully spacious and alive life. And then recoloring you from the foundation up, from the inside out, making us brand new again for that perfect, brand new heavenly place. Jesus is the architect, and Jesus is the perfect place. When you're there on that day, looking him in the face, and these flesh and blood resurrected and ascended eyes are looking at you, they will be physical in some shape or form, and you'll be in a place when he sees you and looks at you there, and you will feel at home, finally at home again.